Hi good people, Titus here for a quick Unreal Engine tutorial on how to create a rolling ball as a player pawn. This will be a very quick and easy tutorial to follow and will demonstrate moving an object around the level using physics forces through the controller input system. Let's jump right into it. Alright, we're going to create two folders. First folder is going to be our blueprints folder. Second one's going to be our input. Let's go into the blueprints, create a new blueprint class of type pawn. We'll call it BP_marble or whatever you want to name it. Double click to open it up. We're going to add a sphere component. We'll rename that to ball. And then with it selected, we can come through and give it an interesting material. So I'm going to maybe do a walnut. And this comes with the starter content. I'm also going to simulate physics. I'm going to set the mass to be about 60 kilograms. And that's going to be good for the static mesh part. After that, we're going to add a spring arm. And then off the spring arm, we're going to add a camera. We'll go ahead and select the spring arm, and it's a little bit too close, so I think I'm going to go to the target arm length, set it to 600. I'm going to select in, press E, and rotate it by 20 degrees, so it's just pointing up a bit. I'm then going to disable pitch, yaw, and roll. And I'm going to enable some camera lag. I'm going to set the lag speed to be 3, max distance to be 500. This is optional, as it's just going to make the project feel a little bit more alive. And then with that, I'm going to compile and save. Come back to my main level, and under the project settings, there's a maps and mode section. You can click on that and do selected game mode. There's a default pawn class. It's currently set to your, whatever starter content you're using, which in this case, third person. I'm going to change that to be the marble. And then if I test this out, you can see I got my marble in the scene. I can't move it around though. So let's go ahead and fix that. We first need to create the input system. The input system uses two mechanisms. A input mapping context, which is just a collection of actions, and then the actual input actions themselves. So we can come into the input section, select the IMC, give it a name, and then we can right click, go back to input, and create the actions. So choose input action, give them a name. For the first one, I'm going to do a left right, and then the second one you could probably already guess, I_up down. I'm going to go into the IMC controller. I'm going to add my two mappings. First one was the left right. Second one was the up down. And I can expand those out. I now need to assign some keys to them. I think starting off I'm going to set up my Xbox controller, so I'll select a gamepad. I'm going to use the left thumbstick, and I'm just going to use the X-axis. And then for the up down, I'm just going to use the left thumbstick, just the Y-axis. I think that's going to be easier. I can go into the input actions for the left right, and changing it from a digital boolean, I'm going to change it to a axis 1D float. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the up down. Alright, and that completes the controller setup for now. We'll come back here and set up the keyboard inputs at a little bit later. But let's actually go back into the marble and see if we can set up the code. So let's go to the event graph. We'll delete everything here. Now if I right click, I can search IA_, and you see the left right. To drive this movement, since we're using physics, I'm going to need a force. So I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call this variable force, and it's going to be a float. And then for the default value, I'm going to try 50,000. And that's based on the static mesh, the marble, which was 60 kilograms. The enhanced input the action value is going to be between 0 and 1, which is we're going to multiply against this force value. So if you're following along and you find that your marble isn't moving, you might have the code right, you just might not be applying enough force to move the heavy object. So either you made it way too much or you didn't apply enough force, so keep that in mind. But it's pretty straightforward. We can just drag the static mesh out, and off that we can do add force. And then when I push the button, I want it to add the force. It is literally that simple. The tricky part is the math in between. So I can drag off this and do a multiply, put my force into here. Now this gives me a power, but it doesn't give me a direction, so I don't know how to go left and right. The best things for left, right, up, and down are going to be your forward vectors and your right vectors. But in order to do those, you need a reference. You can use pretty much anything, but I'm going to use the default scene root. I'll come off that into, for this one, I'm going to use the right vector. And this is already getting a bit messy, so let me see if I can drag this back a bit. There we go. Okay, and then from here we can drag into a multiply node, hook this into there, and this into the force tab. And that's pretty much it. So we got to do the same thing for the up down. So right click, IA underscore up down, and then I can drag the static mesh out, drag off that to do a add force. Very simple code. Now we just need to figure out the math for it. So we'll come into a multiply. We'll do our variable for our force, which is basically our magnitude, or how much power we're moving this thing. And then we can get the scene root as our reference. Drag off that and get forward vector. This one's going to be up down. Drag this back a bit. And more of the same, so we'll go into a multiply node, hook this into there. So now we have a power and a direction. And we can apply this into the force, compile and save, and that is pretty much it for moving left, right, up, and down. However, this will not work, and it should make sense why. Even if I'm using my controller, I got no movement. So we set up the controller input system, but we never told the blueprint to use it. That's why it's not working. It's pretty straightforward, right? So you can right click and do a begin play. You can drag off that and do a cast to player controller. This is a first person project, so we can just drag off the object and do get controller. It'll index and get the first one, which will be our player 1. And then off the player controller, we can drag into that, search enhanced. It'd be cool if they called it enchanted. Get enhanced input local player subsystem. That's the one you want right there. Off this, you can drag into a add mapping context. And this is the magic that lets you assign the IMC controller you made earlier. You'll see it's right there. However, it's good practice to come into a validated get. So do is valid or some type of validation check, just in case your system is not spawning correctly, or you have some other area, it'll basically cause it so it doesn't crash. And then just something like that, and we should be able to move around. Now the keyboard's not going to work, but my controller, if I use my joystick, I can move the little marble around. And it works pretty good. Now if you wanted to take this further and you wanted to add some keyboard input, the code is still pretty much set up, so you don't really have to do much else with that. You just have to go into your controller management system, and you're basically on the left, right, and the up, down. You're just going to add more keys. So for the left, right, we would add a keyboard, and the traditional A and the traditional D. Now there's an issue with this though that we'll get to in a second. Let's go ahead and add it for the up down as well. Up down would be WS typically. So keyboard W and keyboard S. Okay. The reason this is going to cause an issue is because on a keyboard it doesn't know what's negative, what's positive. So if I press A, I'm going right. If I press D, I'm going right. I can only go right, I can't go left. You know, same thing with WS. If I press S, I'm going forward. If I press W, I go forward. The way you handle that is in the controller, we have to add a modifier. So for the A key, you can add a modifier called negate, and that'll basically turn it into a negative value. And then for the S key, you can add a modifier called negate, and that'll turn that into a negative value. So now if I use my keyboard, I can move just like my Xbox controller, and it works just fine. All right, but just going one step further, if you didn't like the static camera, which personally I prefer because your rotations are going to affect your movement, so it's going to look a little weird, but maybe you want to do it anyways. We can use we can add a look function to this. Because I'm in the starter content, there actually already is a look action set up, so I'm just going to steal it. So I can come into my IMC controller that I made, and then I can actually just add a new mapping, and then I can select that IA_look. And then from there I can hit the drop down, and I can add both a mouse, and it'd be a mouse XY 2D, but I can also add a gamepad, and it's going to be the right thumbstick, but I'm going to do right thumbstick 2D axis. And that'll give me my look functionality as far as the controller is concerned. It's still not going to work in game, as you'll see here. I can't move, it's still locked. And that's because the camera system is coded to our marble, and that's being facilitated through the spring arm. Now there's two reasons why it's not working: the spring arm as well as the code isn't set up. So on the spring arm, we need to tell it to use the controller rotation, and we want to inherit the yaw and the pitch. Well, let's just do yaw for now, actually, because pitch is going to look a little weird. But if we go to the event graph, we now need to basically do IA_look. And for this one, you can actually drag into a add controller pitch, roll, and yaw input. So we'll do yaw and we'll do pitch. We'll at least show you what it looks like. We need values though. Under your action value, it's a 2D, so you just right click and you can split it, and you have independent access to each one. So now if I play my game, I can now rotate the thing around using the mouse or the right joystick on my Xbox controller. It works pretty good. The reason I don't like it is because if I turn around, now my left is right and my right is left, because it doesn't take into account your camera rotation. Although if you're clever, you could probably figure out a way around that, or maybe that's the desired effect you want, depending on what you're looking for. And then if you just wanted to add the pitch in there as well, you just go back to your spring arm. Your spring arm's handling all that, so you can just uncheck check the inherit pitch, compile and save, and now suddenly you got free roaming, which could work depending on what you're looking for. All right, good people, I hope you found some informative value in this project demo, but as always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and see you on the next one.